Hello, this is Todd Danielson, Editorial Director for Informed Infrastructure, and welcome to this podcast on disadvantaged business enterprises in civil engineering. Joining me today is David Settlemyer, Senior Industry Strategy Manager at Bentley Systems. Hello, David. Why don't you start by introducing yourself and briefly explaining what you do at Bentley Systems?
Hey, Todd, thank you for having me on this podcast. So I am the Senior Industry Strategy Manager, long title, but basically what it means is I'm looking at how can I help small to medium businesses inside our civil engineering industry. I come from a small firm that I owned in North Carolina years ago. I sold it, got into software, but even after Bentley bought our software company, I still feel that we need to focus on the small to mid businesses that are out there because they act and do things different than a large firm. Bentley's really good at focusing on large firm. So I'm here to help make sure your experience with Bentley System is a pleasant one and you get what you need to do your projects.
All right, thanks, David. I appreciate that. But before we get into the disadvantaged business enterprises, or the DBEs, that I mentioned in the opening, let's briefly discuss the state of the industry today. With the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 2022 is shaping up to be a huge year for infrastructure. How do you see this new law helping small and mid-sized firms?
Yeah, so the IIJA, I'll refer to that way the rest of this, is putting in about $1.2 trillion of infrastructure investment into the industry. And about 550 of that will go over the next couple of years. And that will be mainly focused on things such as roads, bridges, railways, power grids, drinking water, public transportation, resiliency of our roadways. So again, all the things that as a civil engineer we're involved with. So there's a lot of money that's going to be coming down through the system that needs to be diversified and used accordingly. One of the other big things that's also come as part of the IIJA is the continued funding of the DBEs program. And if you don't know what that is, that's a disadvantaged business support services program. It's funded, has been since about 1982 by the federal government. And they're going to add additional funds to this. And it's mainly here to help you as small companies get the training you need, assistance and services to be part of the DBE program. Now, that all being said, there's also another group out there that I just want to throw in here real quick called the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act. This is another set of funding that they're looking for the next couple of years to put about $303 billion in there as well. Now, both the IIJA and the STRA, as it's called, is very important to the DBE community because every one of their projects have to have a minimum, can be more, I've heard more, but I've never heard less than 10% of the project funding has to go to the DBE community. And that's huge. That makes it easier to get the projects, makes it easier to get funding. And also for small firms, one of the biggest problems we have is collecting money. As part of the IIJA, they also understand that part and they're making it part of that you are actually going to make sure if you're a DBE, that you are getting paid in a timely manner. They want to reduce the stress. They don't want you to have issues with late or delayed payments at all. So yeah, something you don't normally hear about is somebody making sure that the small firms get paid. So it's even little side things like that. There's a lot of little things inside the IIJA that's just not about design, but it's about helping the small companies be part of the system.
Okay, thanks, David. So you mentioned a little bit about the DBEs, but what exactly is a disadvantaged business enterprise?
Okay, so a DBE or disadvantaged business enterprise basically is a small company that's at least 51% owned by someone or some people that are considered socially or economically disadvantaged. For example, this might be a woman-owned firm, a minority-owned firm, and a number of other categorizations that you can be as part of to be considered 51%. And they want to have this program so that everybody has a fair playing field inside of projects, because if most of us have ever bid against a larger firm or even a bigger mid-sized firm, it's hard to compete. They can quickly put out resources that we may not have available to counter against. That makes it a little harder for us to win projects. So there's just some basic criteria. It's not a lot to actually be part of the DBE program. You know, your business can't make more than 28 million a year. Your personal wealth can't be over 1.3 million. You can't be a subsidiary of a big firm. And the biggest thing is you as the owner being, again, whether it's race, gender, culture, whatever it may be, you have to control this company. This is yours and nobody else is coming in and doing this. And another thing about DBs, I think some people just don't think about as much, is DBEs are extremely important to design process. And I got two examples of that because I want to make sure that when we're talking about DBEs, we're not just talking about some people that do some drafting or do some minor engineering. These are firms that are very independent to the ecosystem of a project. So I've had a couple calls over the last few weeks, and two of them that I really like. They fit exactly into what a DBE is and how they bring value to a large project. So again, you got these huge mega projects or large highways. Not all of it's being done by the mega companies. A lot of it's being done by the smaller firms. So there was a firm that I talked to that worked with larger firms that did bridge and tie-in roadways on these interchanges. And all they did was slope stabilization. 15-man firm. That's all they worried about. They did slope stabilization. They were experts in it. They worked in multiple states. They grew because of being a DBE, and they were able to do this specialized design because that's what they're for. Another one was a firm, I'd never heard of a firm that did just this part of a highway. They were brought in by multiple DOTs out in the Midwest to only do ditches. They designed reinforced ditches along the interstates. Again, that's their specialty. It was an under 10-person firm, but they're able to bring that expertise into the project. And because they meet the DB qualifications, they're able to use some of that pool to be able to get projects and be able to get into scenarios that typically they may not get into because they're not part of the DBE program.
All right, great. I think that helps a lot. So does being a DBE have advantages in the transportation industry? And if so, how?
Sure. So again, most DBEs are out there helping and being part of a major project. And there's also smaller projects that you could pick up as well. But the best part of it is being a DBE in the transportation industry, you're supported. If you're trying to be a small firm inside of other industries, you don't get a lot of support from the residential community, for example. But in the transportation industry, DOTs are set up to help you. So for example, almost every DOT has a special liaison group that is there to do nothing but help support you from getting your certifications to finding projects to getting paid. They have people just for that. Each state has a unified certification program. So if they want to get funding from the federal government on their highway projects, they have to have a DBE program in place, and they have to use DBE. For example, the 10% in the IIJA. Anybody who wants to get that money has to have 10% of their projects done by somebody who's a certified DBE firm. And there's even an interstate certification that a number of them do that allows you to work in multiple states, similar to the firm I talked about up top that did slope stabilization over about 5 or 6 states. They're interstate certified, which allows you to do more. Again, these are things you don't get in other industries. So the transportation industry really understands the value of a DBE, and they want to bring them in and use them as part of their system. Because one of the things they also have to do as part of that program, they have to do, the major company, not the DB, has to do what are called DBE goals, and they have to certify that they've used them on this amount of work, again, or they don't get that funding. So I went out and looked at the state of Vermont, because this is a state I've never worked with. I don't even know if I've even been there. But I said, what are some examples of some things that you can do in the DOT that you maybe can't do in other areas for dealing with the DBE? So in their area, they say you can be part of construction, whether it's construction management or construction itself. You can be in part of utility relocation. You can be part of directional drilling. Of course, civil and environmental engineering was right up near the top. Pipeline, paving. So there's a lot of things as a DBE that maybe you're on here and you're going, I'm not an engineering firm. That's fine. Just because you're DB and you're not a civil engineering firm does not mean you can't take part in this program. There is many different applications in each state that can be done to meet those DB requirements and to be able to work inside those DBE programs and again, take advantage of that 10% required spend.
All right, thanks, David. That was very helpful. So I've heard that the conventional wisdom is that good DBE firms are difficult to find. Why is that?
A lot of them come from well, it mainly comes from two reasons. One of them is it's not an easy process to get certified. It takes a little time, takes a lot of paperwork going back and forth because they want to make sure that you can do what you say you do. It's not about just filling out an application. That's well, I've talked to a few of them. That's probably the easiest part. You fill out the application, you have to go through some reviews. You got to prove you're worthy. They're not going to let you just go in and work on a transportation project if you've never used the software that the DOT requires. They're going to need to know that you know how to work with inside that group. So that, again, doesn't eliminate people, but it just makes the process of getting there slower. So as you're starting up your company or you're small and you say, hey, I want to get into a DOT, I want to get part of this IIJA, it's not just going to happen overnight. It takes a little bit of time. So that limits the amount of firms. But the biggest thing I see when I talk to the industry is a lot of the firms are already being used. There are not enough firms to go around to all the larger projects that are out there. There's a lot of little firms, but again, if you're not certified, it doesn't matter. So a lot of these big companies, once they find DBEs that are good at what they do, I'll go back to my two examples. Those two firms have repeat clientele. They do not do a lot of chasing projects because they're good at what they do. They're known for it. They work with bigger firms, and the bigger firms keep coming back. So what does that mean? If they've only got a certain bandwidth, again, hard for people to find DBEs that are out there. So that's one of the big values of becoming a DBE. You're going to be able to get into an ecosystem of projects that will just naturally come back to you as reoccurring clients. And for any business person, recurring clients, it's where it's at. You always want to pick up some new ones for growth. But if I can keep people coming back, you're going to grow, you're going to do more work, and it just makes life so much easier. So it's not that there's not good DBEs out there. It's just that there's not a lot of them.
All right, thanks, David. That makes sense. So how is Bentley and Virtuosity helping the DBE community?
Right. So Bentley Systems has been around for over 3 decades, and it's worked on projects, some of the biggest mega projects in the world. And that's what it's sort of gotten known as. You want to do a hard project, you want to do a very sophisticated project, complex, you go use Bentley products. And a lot of the larger engineering firms in the world do that. But the one thing most people don't realize, Bentley Systems is the leading civil engineering software seller in the world. And a lot of our users are not mega firms. A lot of them are what you would call mid to small firms. So a couple of years ago, Bentley started looking at, when you work with Bentley, we tend to have that large firm feel. So we needed to create something that gives you a small, more personal touch. Enter Virtuosity. It's a Bentley-owned company, but if you buy and interact with Virtuosity, things will be a little bit different. For example, Virtuosity has a DBE discount program. It allows you, when you're first getting in and using some of the newer softwares out there that the DOTs are going to, say, for example, Open Roads, you're going to get a discount. That's going to help you get in and get started, overcome some of that burden of, how do I pay for this? We're going to help you with that. Training, support, all that is focused to be more one-on-one, sort of a channel feels, a local person feel, so that you're not out constantly just dealing with emails or going to websites and looking at learn content. We've created a company that gives you more personal feel so that you can grow the way you need to grow, get the support you need to, so that as a DBE, you're going to be able to do the projects that you need. For example, I was working with a firm just the other day, a minority woman-owned firm. And she told me it was first time working with Virtuosity, first time working with Open Roads. She couldn't even get it to install. And she came from one of our competitors who was used to waiting to get responses. She said she went to Virtuosity, sent in an email, and within an hour, she had everything installed, ready to go, and up and working. Those are the kind of things that you'll get with Virtuosity. You leave the big company feeling behind, and you get a small personalized relationship. And you don't get that in many places inside the engineering community. A lot of people just love to sell you software. If you got a problem, email the help or support desk, and we'll see what we can do for you. So Bentley's now and going forward mission is to start helping the SMB, the small, medium businesses, to be able to compete and do projects that the larger firms traditionally have been able to take control of. And again, we're going to be able to do this by allowing you to learn and buy and do things at a smaller firm type mentality. It's going to make it easier for you to get on board with our tools and be able to deliver those better projects.
Thanks, David. That was a great discussion and extremely informational. And thanks for taking the time to help our audience better understand their technology options. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. But where this podcast resides, you can also find links and notes about other ways to learn more about Bentley's products geared toward disadvantaged business enterprises. And thanks to all of you out there listening, Hope you check out the rest of Informed Infrastructure's educational opportunities and content.